بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of precious book Training and Education in Islam by late Ayatollah Mutahhari. In the last session, we talked about the role of the habits in education. Towards end of that lesson, Ayatollah Mutahhari starts discussion about what makes an action a moral action, an ethical action. And he mentions few opinions, few views, and then in the next lesson, which we want to study today, he starts discussing some of them, like the idea of Immanuel Kant, German philosopher. Before I start explaining what is in the book, I have to draw your attention to a distinction between two ways of saying something is moral. Sometimes when we say something is moral, or in Farsi, Arabic, we say akhlaqi, means something which is related to the field of morality and ethics. Good or bad is different. Right or wrong is something else. We want to know what is discussed, what is studied, what is evaluated in akhlaq, in the science of akhlaq, or morality or ethics. For example, those actions that we do naturally, not by our will, they are not voluntary action, they are not iradi, they are tabi'i, natural actions. Like what? Like blood circulation. Many things happen in our body that they happen based on nature. Or for example, our hair grows, our nails grow, our body to some extent grows, then goes to decline. These are not moral. In what sense? In the sense that they have no moral status, they have no moral significance. We don't discuss about them in akhlaq because we don't have any role about them. What is moral in the sense that what is discussed in the science of akhlaq must be something which is voluntary, which is iradi. Okay? So this is one question. And in English, when they want to say something is not related to the field of akhlaq, they say amoral. But then those things which are related to akhlaq, some of them are moral or ethical, meaning they have positive value, and some are unethical. We call them immoral, means they have negative value. So there are two things. What is moral and what is amoral, means has nothing to do with akhlaq, is outside the field of akhlaq. The second thing is that those things which are related to akhlaq, which have positive value and which have negative value. Here we say moral in contrast to immoral. Okay? So now, the question is, what action should be studied in akhlaq what is related, what is relevant, what is not. And then those which are discussed in akhlaq, we have to evaluate them. What makes an action morally right? What makes an action morally wrong? What makes an action morally good or morally bad? This is discussed in moral philosophy, and alhamdulillah, we have had some courses on moral philosophy. They are available on YouTube. You can watch them if you are interested. Now we try to limit our discussion to what is in the book here. So Ayatollah Mutahhari says, some people have said everything which is iradi, which is voluntary, is moral, but in the sense that related to akhlaq. But he says this is not enough, because maybe there are things which are iradi, but we may, for example, still not consider them as akhlaq. Like, for example, walking or talking. We do it with irada, but walking as such is not akhlaqi. For example, we will talk about this in more details later. He says some people may say if something has a relation with others, an action which is geared towards others, this is akhlaqi, this is moral. But then he says maybe someone does something like mothers. Mothers may do something for their children, but if they do it out of ghariza, out of instinct, out of their motherly nature, and not with intention of being ethical, then this may not be morally discussed. This can be just instinct. If, for example, a mother has no care about children of other people, and just by force of nature is taking care of her children, then that might not be moral. Of course, this is something that it needs lots of discussion. In my series on moral philosophy, we have talked about this and the idea of self-love, and how I believe motherly love also is very ethical, or can be very ethical. But anyway, we don't want to go into that discussion. And then there are also actions which may be ethical and have nothing to do with others. So if you say anything which has something to do with others is ethical, so we have two problems. One is that there are things that may be related to others and not ethical, natural, habitual. And there are things which are ethical but not related to others. You are alone, but still you can be moral. For example, if you are a person who takes care of, for example, his or her time, talents, you don't waste your talents or time. This is ethical, but has nothing to do with others. Some people, like those people that we mentioned, that they are against the role of habits in education, they say everything which is done based on aql and irada, on reason and will, that is ethical. They limit it to this. Some people say that something which is done out of moral sense of responsibility with the power of conscience, it's ethical, like Immanuel Kant. Kant has two parts in his philosophy. He has theoretical discussions and practical, aql amali, aql nazari. When it comes to theoretical intellect, he has ideas which are very problematic many times. And he brought lots of doubts and lots of things. But he himself was a believer in God, and he believed very much in ethics, and he argued for the existence of God based on human conscience. If you study books on existence of God or books on philosophy of religion, they have an argument they call moral argument for existence of God. That is what Kant is very happy and develops. But the thing is that, unfortunately, in the West, among philosophers, critique of Kant, of the intellect, was more accepted, and then his efforts to establish God and ethics based on Amali, practical intellect, that were not very much received. Therefore, unlike himself, many people who are Kantian may not be, believers in God. In any case, Kant was very much interested in conscience, and it is written on his grave, this famous, word of Kant, that there are two things which astonish me. One is the sky with the stars above us, and what is conscience or vajdan inside us. So for Kant, inshallah, we'll discuss now in the next lesson, to do things out of conscience and moral sense of responsibility, it's the criteria. And there are some materialist people that Ayatollah Mutahari says, even if they talk about akhlaq, but unfortunately they have undermined the foundations of akhlaq. If you reduce everything to matter and materialism, then there is no strong foundation left for akhlaq. So this was end of previous lesson. Now we go to the lesson which starts the discussion about what makes an action moral. And Ayatollah Mutahari has actually 3 lessons about this. So he has lesson 5 of the book, or session 5, because this was a series of his lectures. Lecture 5 or lesson 5, 6 and 7 are about this issue. And then session 8 or lesson 8 is about ethical relativism. And then he continues with other topics. So now we are discussing about the idea of what makes an action moral, first part, which is session 5 of Ayatollah Mutahari's book. Before he starts the main discussion, he says that we have to distinguish between training and akhlaq, tarbiyah and akhlaq, training and morality, for example. Training or tarbiyah is general, is more general than akhlaq. We can use training even for training animals. For example, they may train a dog to be a dog, for example, for the farm or for hunting. They can train a pigeon to act as a messenger for taking messages. Training can be used for animals as well, but we don't use akhlaq for animals. Number 2, even for human beings, training does not necessarily involve moral values and virtues. Yeah, maybe they train someone to be, for example, actually very vicious. Maybe some, political or I don't know, some kind of racist groups, some gangsters. They train their own members in order to be very arrogant, very vicious, very stubborn, very cruel. This can be also called training. Training, tarbiyah, as such, does not mean that they are doing something, in order to make people more virtuous, more righteous. Of course, when we say tarbiyah, we mean Islamic tarbiyah. We mean tarbiyah in the sense of, developing human virtues and godly virtues. But training or tarbiyah in general can be unethical, actually, and can be ethical. But akhlaq is different. Akhlaq, morality, is always used for human beings only, not for animals, and also for upbringing, for developing, or safeguarding good traits of character and good actions. The science of akhlaq is for this way. Maybe some people, of course, then they want to develop their own akhlaq, but we don't normally call it akhlaq. For example, if criminals want to have their own, own professional ethics, if they really want to have ethics, they have to be virtuous. And if they want to use ethics for being more criminal, then we don't call it ethics. We don't call it akhlaq. But if they want to insist, then that's another usage, another terminology. So this is the first point, that the difference between akhlaq and training. Akhlaq is also different from acting according to just nature, tabi'ah. Akhlaq is not against nature. We don't accept to act against it. There are some people, for example, who choose, to do some kind of exercises that would reduce, eating, sleeping, drinking, but to the extent that they may harm their body. Like some, we call them mortas. Some people who have very hard disciplines and they want to weaken their shahawat, but they go to the extreme. That is not what we accept. Akhlaq is different from acting according to nature, but should not be against nature. When you act according to nature, nature is the animal side of us, tabi'ah. The physical animal side of us is our nature. Nature is different from fitra. Fitra is exclusive to human beings. But natural actions like breathing, like eating, drinking, these kind of things, these are not yet at the level of akhlaq. So we have to raise above nature, but not by opposing and conflicting with nature. Rather, to use nature for the sake of something higher, which is human. Now, let's go to the main discussion. Some theories about the criteria for an action being moral. The first theory is what he called degardusti. We call it altruism. Altruism means that an action is only good if it helps others, it benefits others. If I benefit myself, they say, you are egoist. It's not akhlaq, you are benefiting yourself. But if you benefit others, you do something for the sake of others, they say, this is akhlaq. He says that this idea is not complete. Again, I say, if you want to know more about these theories and, with, a very systematic approach, you have to study moral philosophy, because here we are not studying moral philosophy. We are just referring to some discussion. In the courses on moral philosophy, we have explained this. So we say there are different attitudes towards akhlaq. One is to look at the outcomes of the actions. We call it teleo, not theolo, teleological view. Teleo comes from telos. Telos means end, ghaya. So these views, which are teleological, they say an action is good based on the outcome, the consequences. And there are deontological views. We say an action is good based on moral beauty. And then there is virtue ethics, which is revived, especially in the 60s onwards. It's a return to the Aristotelian approach. People like McIntyre, Alistair McIntyre, have revived this, and they pay more attention to virtues than actions. And action is good if it's suitable for a virtue and comes out of a virtue. So there are three major views, and then those who are teleological ethicists, they say that then those outcomes can be for yourself. Then you become egoist. Egoist say an action is good if it has good outcome for yourself. Altruists say an action is good if the outcomes are for others. And then universalists say for everyone, you are also included, but you're not only you. Others are also included, not excluding you. So then for everyone, if not for everyone, because it's difficult to do something which is good for everyone, then the greater number of people. And then these are divided about what is a good benefit or good outcome. Is it welfare? Is it pleasure? Is it tranquility? Is it nearness to God? Whatever. So there are many different ways to discuss these things. We are now having very brief discussion. So altruists are those who believe in teleological approach. The outcome should be good, but they say for others. Okay? So Ayatollah Mutahari says, what do you mean to do something good for others? If it is just good for others, is it necessarily akhlaqi? Again, he mentions the example of a mother who does good, even maybe she sacrifices her comfort, her health for children. But if it is just out of nature, out of natural instinct, is it ethical? Or must be something that she does it with understanding, with will, and with something unselfish? Because as long as you look after only your children and you love only your children, how can you make sure that this is not selfish? We appreciate that mothers have such instincts and you look after their children, but we appreciate more if a mother extends this love also to other children. And if, for example, I find as a father or mother that another child is better than my child, another child is, for example, more serving the cause of the truth, another child is closer to Allah, shouldn't I love him more? Or at least from some aspect, I should love him more or not? Like, for example, we love children of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam more than we love our children. But it's not only them. Any person, any child, we should have care for them. But of course, if they go higher in the ladder of virtues, we should love them more. So there are lots of questions here. Just to say that, for example, someone is doing something which is good for others doesn't make an action moral. It can be because of their instincts only and their nature only. It can be because of them wanting to achieve something through this. So we have to be very careful. Even about ithar, some people said if it is ithar, ithar means to prefer others over ourselves. يؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. Allah praises people that choose others over themselves even if they have need. For example, they have food, they have money, they have dress. Others also need, they also need. If they have extra, they can share. This is mubasat. Mubasat means to share. Ithar means I need, others need, and we don't have enough to share. So I give preference to them. So some people said akhlaq has to be involving ithar, means self-sacrifice, promoting others and sacrificing my own, comfort, convenience, whatever. Ayatollah Mutahari says again why they do ithar. This is important. For example, there are people that they are after name and fame. You know, some people who do things for others, for example, they try to help poor people, or, you know, they defend their own country, but they're after fame, or they are just after some nationalism or racism or tribalism. Why they do Isa? There are people who are happy to die so that a good name remains from them, for example. Or, you know, they are dying just in order to, for example, get revenge. This is not enough. Why they do Isa? So he says say altruism is better than saying just Isa without clarifying these details. Then he refers to the idea that mutakallimun, theologians, have discussed about husn qub. You know, we have a very important discussion in the science of kalam about goodness and badness, and then intrinsic goodness and badness, rational goodness and badness, husn qub zati, husn qub aqli, shar'i. A beautiful discussion. We have discussed this in Introduction to the Science of Kalam by Ayatollah Mutahari. We have a series lecture there. And also in many other places, in Baba Hadi Ash, Sharh Tajrid, many places, alhamdulillah, we have discussed. So according to theologians, especially we are talking about Shiite theologians and Mu'tazilites who are rational in their approach, they say there are actions that by their essence, they are good. And there are actions that by their essence are bad, and there are actions that maybe by their essence they are neutral. For example, justice, whether we are religious or not, whether we are Muslim or Christian or atheist, whatever, justice in its essence is good. Number one. So it's is intrinsic goodness. Number two, we can understand by our intellect that justice is good. Ash'arites had the idea that there is no intrinsic goodness and badness, and we only learned it from religion. Allah could have said justice is good, he could have said justice is bad. For them, there is no independent, objective criteria for goodness and badness. This idea was also available in Judaism. Some Jewish thinkers, some Christian thinkers also had similar idea to the Ash'arites. They call it divine command theory. But we say no. Like some other Jewish and Christian thinkers, we say no. When Allah says something is good or bad, it's because they are really good or bad. It's not arbitrary. And it's not that Allah, you know, could have said anything. He could have said, you should be kind. He could have said, you should be unkind. You should, you know, respect the rights of people, or you should not respect them. He could have said anything, but he said, you know, in this way. He could have said the opposite way. No. Allah will never, you know, say something arbitrarily. Everything that he says has a reason, has a basis in reality, and he's wise. He understands, he knows, he has unlimited knowledge about these interests, real interests and real harms, masalih al-mafasid al-waqi'iyya. In any case, this discussion of husn qub is also an important discussion about what is making an action good, what is making an action bad. Although philosophers may have disagreements sometimes, but I think actually here is an area that is a very good area to you know, explore. And at this point, Ayatollah Mutahari is very brief about this, but I hope inshallah in future we can explore it more. Especially we distinguish between two things, husn fi'li and husn fa'ili. This is not in the book, but please remember this point. One point is what makes an action good, what makes an action bad. For example, is abortion good or bad? Is telling truth good or bad? Is giving charity good or bad? It's about action. We have to make sure that we choose an action which is good in itself. But then we have also husn fa'ili. Just if an action is good is not enough to make your action ethical. Husn fa'ili is also important. Means the agent also should have good approach. For example, suppose there are people who are really needy, they really need help, and I have money or food to give them. Okay? So this action of giving them money or food is good action. But if I do it in order to show off, is this a good action? No. What is wrong? Giving money or food to them is not wrong. But there is no husn fa'ili. There is husn fa'ili. There's goodness in action, but not goodness in the agent. Because agent has no good intention. Or imagine if someone is drunk or is sleepy and doesn't understand what he's doing, and then gives some money. We say he has no attention. He's no conscience. There is no value. Like someone who is sleeping, and the night when he's sleeping, he says give my money, give 50 pounds to this poor family neighboring us. But he's sleeping. In the dream he was talking. This has no ethical value because he didn't mean it. So there must be attention, there must be intention, and the intention must be good. And then based on ma'rifah, the value increases. Two people who do things with attention and sincere intention, but depending on their yaqeen, on their ma'rifah, the value can be very different. Two people say 2 rak'ah salah with sincerity, but how much ma'rifah they have, how much love they have, how much taqwa they have, makes the value very much different, how much presence of heart they have. So there are lots of things that in Islamic science of ethics we consider: goodness of action, goodness of agent, and amal salih in the Quran is the one that has both. We don't call amal salih for any action which has one side only. For example, if I have very good intention, very sincere, but I give poison instead of medicine to someone, it's not amal salih. You give a poison by mistake, you think this medicine. Is this amal salih? No. You are not a qualified doctor and you prescribe something with all the sincerity. This is not amal salih. Or if you give a medicine, real medicine, but your intention is not good, it's not amal salih. Amal salih has to have good intention, goodness of the agent, plus goodness of action. Anyway, this is also one approach which is very important, but we may explore later. The other approach is the approach of Kant. Again, he a little bit talks about this here, that an action for Kant is moral if it is done out of moral sense of responsibility with your conscience. For example, a shopkeeper. Kant says if a shopkeeper sells good products with good price, with good services, good, customer service, etc., this still doesn't mean that it is an ethical action. We have to see what's the reason. Does he give good price, good services in order to sell more, to have more customers, or it is done out of moral sense of responsibility? If he does this in order to have more customers and sell more, this is called prudence. Prudence is different from ethics. In Farsi, we say maslahat andishi. So you are just calculating what can be better for my business. Unfortunately, some people are short-sighted. They think that by cheating, they can make more money. Some people are not short-sighted. They say, no, I have to be honest. I have to give good services. In the long term, I will have more customers. I can sell more. I can make more profit. Kant says this is not akhlaq. Akhlaq is that you are honest even if you know it's not going to change. Whether you are honest or not honest, you are not going to make any more money or less money. Or Even you may know that you are going to make less money. Suppose market is so bad and people are so, much in rush. They never go back to someone who is honest. They just want to buy quickly something. If you are an ethical shopkeeper, you would still tell the truth, even if it's not useful for you, even if it may be harmful for you. You don't compromise about your conscience and your moral principles. This is the idea of Kant. Of course, there are good points in these arguments, but it's not complete. Inshallah, we'll explain more in the future. Another idea is that they say altruism, but acquired altruism. To distinguish between what is natural altruism, like, the instinct that a mother may have for children. They say, okay, this, as long as it's just instinct, may not be moral. But if it is acquired altruism, for example, with strangers, with people that are not our family, our relatives, you try to be kind, you try to be generous, you try to help them. This is acquired altruism, and you can enlarge your heart to reach out to everyone. This is acquired altruism. Some people who have religious approach, they talk about pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An action is good if you do it for the sake of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِوَجْهِ إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We feed you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek His face, His wajh. Any action, you can do it for yourself or for others, but if it is for sake of Allah, then this is making an action good. So he says, what all these theories agree on is that as long as you are just selfish and you want just to serve yourself, especially if you want to serve your short-term interests and get quick satisfaction, this is not akhlaq. Yes, if you think about your long-term interests, if you want to rise the ladders of perfection or nearness to Allah, that can be akhlaqi. But selfishness, no. And you are selfish, you are not actually serving yourself, and you are not serving others. Then he starts focusing more on the theory of Kant. We leave it, inshallah, for the next session. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Are there questions, comments?
If there are any questions, please raise your hand.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Allah bless you, inshallah.
Thank you. You are commenting on earning right means or wrong means. Earning.
Means?
We see people earn through right means, but they generally didn't know spent on the right way or right path. Please comment on that.
Your question
Earn money.
Yeah, please explain more.
People didn't know where spent money.
They didn't know their money?
Yes, on the right means or right place. They earn through the right way.
They don't spend the
They
money.
Ji.
Oh?
Yeah.
So what's the question?
Comment on that point.
Of course, we should earn money from right, ethical, religiously legitimate sources, and we should spend them also in right causes and also in balanced. So for example, sometimes where we spend is not legitimate at all, is not pleasing to Allah at all. Sometimes it is pleasing to Allah, but then we should not do it in excess. For example, you should be able to spend money for clothes, but you shouldn't do israf. Buy clothes which are very expensive or very luxurious, or too many, clothes that you don't need. You can spend on food, but not buying food which is harmful to your health, or too much food that is not good to eat, and also sometimes will be wasted. So legitimate cause, legitimate place, and up to also legitimate amount. Even for infaq, Quran says, لا تبسط يدك كل البسط ولا تجعلها مغلولة إلى عنقك. When you want to give also charity, don't give too little, don't give too much so that you become bankrupt and you cannot look after your own needs and family. You have to look after your family and needs, but also help others. You have to find the balance. If you lose your own financial stability and become dependent on others, this is not good. But also, keep saving money, buying more houses, etc., and not helping others. This is not also good. So where we spend and how much we spend are important, both to be taken into consideration. Thanks for your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Aga, my question is, like you were talking about, intentions and helping others also in a certain point. But if we have got a good intention for somebody and we are really not having a very detailed knowledge of, as we are also struggling in our life and in a mature age, we got to know that we need to be consciously putting an effort for information regarding deen. So if we wanted to help somebody who is in problem, they've got some financial problem, or there is somebody sick in their family, if we just give them a general suggestion regarding, reciting Dua Tawassal or reciting Ziyarat Ashur or something like that, which is just like, which works for us. And we just give them a suggestion like, you should, we listen from one of the scholars in Majlis that you should recite this for that. So this is my first question. Like, is it okay? We are doing it with good intention because it works for us. We're just gonna give them a suggestion that you can recite it and it will work for you as well. So can we do it without having a complete detailed knowledge of their, stuff? Can we do it? Is it good? And second question is like, how important is mentorship in today's world, for personalized mentorship in today's world, where the scope of information is very open in the media? Like even in the rules, when in there's and in lectures, we get information which is an open-ended information. So everybody's just taking that whole bulk of information, and everybody's has definitely got a different set of situations, and but everybody's trying to put up with that. But how important is it for people to have their personalized mentors in this field to focus their specified problems? And how can one get mentored in our should we try to contact scholars like you and other scholars? Should we take their personalized number? But of course you guys are busy in your life as well, so what kind of mentors should be in this field who can help us about our personalized life journeys? Thank you so much.
Allah bless you, inshallah. Regarding the first question, when you offer an advice, for example, someone has family issues, financial issues, you want to give them advice, for example, to do this ziyarah, do this dua. Still, you should have a good reason to justify this advice. If you have read in some books or have heard from some scholars, you can share. If it is your personal experience that this has worked for you, then you can say, this is my personal experience that it has worked for me, or this is the source. Otherwise, it's better not to give advice, and for example, ask someone to check with some place. Because when people are in difficulty, if they keep receiving lots of different advice, and then they try everyone and doesn't work, they will be, upset, and they will be sometimes also overwhelmed. Regarding mentorship, yes, mentorship is very, very important. Part of it can be taken from general instructions. For example, in this age, how we as individuals and as community should follow the right path. How should we reach out? There are many, alhamdulillah, good advice lectures available, and you have to find scholars that are well educated, they are well recognized, they have history of success. This is also very important, because if someone has just graduated and has not worked with the community, and there is no sign of success, if you listen to this person, it's risky. So there are general things which are available, but in an ideal situation, everyone should try to connect to some scholars. If there are local scholars which are qualified, it's better, because they are more aware of your local situation and they are more available. If they are not local, then national. If not national, then international. But first you start with your local scholars. And you should keep searching till you find, inshallah, someone that can give you wise advice. But we all need mentors. Even I believe many scholars, they need mentors, because they are still young, they are still not experienced, and there are lots of things to consider. Sometimes people, as soon as they can give lectures and they receive some good response, they start preaching, but they need mentors. Everyone needs more mentors. Even our maraj, we have lots of stories that they used to also ask some ulama who were very pious to be giving them a spiritual advice. So we should always try to find people who are qualified and benefit from them as much as possible. Maybe one in a month, maybe one in a week, as much as possible, maybe one in 6 months, but it's better than having no one. Thank you for your questions.
Yes, sisters. Sister Aruj. Dr. Jawed.
Moulaana Sahab, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Moulaana Sahab, I am calling from Pakistan. My name is Rafe'e. Sir, yes, I have read in the Mufati and Nawaz Alihin that Khudawand Ta'ala fixed Malaikas especially on the Friday, on the Jumerat din, Thursday after Maghrib, they instructed the Malaika only write down the salawat, which is like a Bismillah Rahman Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammadin wa ajil farajam. So I always recite like this. So one time somebody told me that please you should Shabe Juma read Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So I said Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So once I reach 51 time, Alhamdulillah, somebody put, I was wake up at that time. Somebody put on my mouth one hand. So I feel somebody put hand. Just when I started salawat same like this, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammadin wa ajil farjahum, the feeling of the hand finished. And one time I asked God, please show me who was here at that time when I was reciting Alhamdulillah. So after 2 days, I was reciting the same salawat. So all of a sudden, one vibration, strong vibration created in my room. I was wake up, and one in the waves of something like having some small beard, and he appeared on my face, and he was showing the hands, and then he immediately escaped that time. So then I realized I don't know who. Then I asked this Zaki Baghri Sahab. Then I the same question which I am telling you. So you please tell me these things. And one thing more, I want to ask. It is in Surah Hamim Sajda, the ayat number 29. Most of the people, I ask what is the correct pronunciation of this ayat. They always says Zeen al-Lazina. Actually, it is written Zain al-Lazina. You can see 29th ayat of Surah Hamim Sajda. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. There can be different explanations. I need to know your background, and there can be different physical, spiritual explanations for this. It's better to ask an alim that knows you and your background, your physical, spiritual, condition to comment on what happened or what you felt. The ayah, your question is about the pronunciation?
Yes, it was my pronunciation. Habib Sajda, Surah 29.
Surah 29, verse what? Which verse?
29.
Surah Ankabut?
No, Surah Hamim Sajda, ayat number 29.
So Surah 32.
No, Surah Hamim Sajda, Surah number 41, Hamim Sajda, ayat number 29.
Hamim for Salat.
Yeah, Hamim Sajda, yes.
Which verse?
29th ayat.
29. وقال الذين كفروا ربنا أرنا الذين أضلانا من الجن والإنس نجعلهما تحت أقدامنا ليكونا من الأسفلين. الذين, not الذين, because it's a two. الذين أضلانا. It's not الذين أضلونا. It's not plural. It's musanna. It's dual. الذين أضلانا.
Correct, very correct. So when I asked people, they said Zin al-Lazina. I told him Zain
al-Lazain.
Zain al-Lazina.
Al-Lazain is for two. Al-Lazi, Al-Lazaina, Al-Lazina. Al-Lazi is one, Al-Lazaina two, Al-Lazina three more.
Yes, correct. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Jazakumullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Ji, Dr. Javed Hassan Akhtar from Dera Ghazi Khan, Pakistan.
May Allah bless you, inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Such kind of dars. Just my question is regarding morality teaching. Whether morality can be taught through training or through education, which one is the best?
Of course, education, if it is comprehensive, would include training as well. We need teaching and we need training. Therefore, I always say formation is very important. You cannot just, give them in a classroom some, lessons. It's very important to have formation, training. So both mind and heart of the trainee need to be involved. If you just engage their minds, is not enough. We need to work on their mind, on their hearts, both together. And this needs information and formation, not just information.
Thank you very much.
Jazakumullah.
There are a couple of questions in chat. So the first one is from Sister Saida.
And we need to finish in 5 minutes maximum.
Okay, no problem. Inshallah, we'll finish within 5 minutes.
Yes.
So from Saida Al-Fatima, she is asking, please explain the difference between fitra and nature.
Nature, when we say about human beings, we mean that aspect which is there even without training, without education, without self-building. That is our animal, side, what we share with animals. That is the nature. In addition to that, we have fitra. Fitra is the God-given exclusive creation. Allah has made human beings not in the form of animals. Yes, we have animal soul, but we have also fitra. In our fitra, we have some types of understanding and some types of desires. You don't find them in animals. And these are above instincts. In Islamic belief system course, when we talked about fitra, we have explained these things. So if we go just by nature, by tabi'ah, then we may be jealous, we may be selfish, we may be greedy. Like Quran says, for example, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَيَتْقَى أَنْ رَآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. Or for example, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا. Yeah, but this is just nature. But if we follow our fitra and act according to fitra and aql, because fitra and aql are in harmony with each other, then we are not greedy, we are not selfish, we are not jealous. So it's very important that we use our nature at the service of our fitra and aql and religion. Otherwise, we do everything in order to just please our animalistic, part and desires.
Okay, so one question from Brother Anwar saying, Assalamu alaikum. As a specialist medical doctor, can I ask ethically higher fees because I'm good and I have good results?
There are two discussions. One is that ulama discuss about whether a doctor should charge for health, or you can say life-threatening things. You should ask your marja. Many ulama say that if someone is in a life-threatening situation, you should not charge them, so that if they are not able to pay, they will die. Some say, you may charge them, but for other things, because, akhdul ujra ala al-wajibat is a big thing that, we don't have in our fiqh room for charging people for the things which are obligatory upon you. Therefore, for example, if it is life-threatening situation, or for example, if someone needs to learn aqa'id, I cannot say I charge you if to teach you wajibat of aqa'id. Yes, but some ulama say, for example, you may charge them for going, coming, transport, rent of the office. For example, there are discussions here, but I think this is not your question. That's a fiqh question. I think your question is an ethical question. Is it ethical that I charge my patients more if my knowledge, my experience, my results are better than others? It's a matter of urf. It's a matter of what is fair in that society. If in that society this is considered to be fair, you are not overcharging. You are just asking fair charge for a person in that condition, and everyone expects that, and everyone knows that. Then this is ethical. But if it is not fair, if people think you are misusing your situation and you are, overcharging, then it's not ethical. But always you have to be careful about people who cannot afford. So even if your charge is fair, but someone cannot afford, so it's not ethical to make it a condition and say, I don't help you unless you give me.
Thank you, Abba. So that's all for now. Okay,
jazakumullah khairan. So we end with quick dua of faraj, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا اللهم اشف مرضانا اللهم ارحم موتانا اللهم اقض حوائجنا اللهم أد عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. May Allah be with you and support you and give you success in dunya and akhirah, inshallah. التماس دعاء.
جزاك الله.
أحسنت في أمان.